January 1st, 2010, while London celebrates a new decade under a sky full of fireworks, the energy inside the Newton Arms pub in Thornton Heath has just turned deadly. Wentworth Deslands, a father and a respected landlord, is staring down the cold steel of a 9mm handgun. It's shoved into his mouth. He can taste the oil. He can feel the metal against his teeth. Opposite him is Saturday Lob Singh Hassan, a man who has just turned a family celebration into a firing squad. Hassan pulls the trigger, click, nothing. He pulls it again, click, and a third time, click. In that silence, Wentworth realises two things. His son Darren is lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and his other son Junior has just taken 3 bullets to the skull. This wasn't just a pub brawl, this was a targeted execution. But as the shooter turns to run, he realises he's made one fatal mistake. He didn't just attack a business, he attacked a bloodline. And the Deslanders family, they don't stay down. To understand the horror of what happened that night, you have to understand the place where it happened. The Newton Arms wasn't just another London boozer. In Thornton Heath, it was an institution. It was the kind of place where the landlord knew your name, your dad's name, and what you'd been up to all week. At the helm was Wentworth Deslandis, a man who had spent decades building a reputation for fairness. He ran a clean house. If you wanted trouble, you went elsewhere. To help him run the place, he had his 2 sons, 34-year-old Darren and 25-year-old Junior. Darren was the gentle giant of the family, a father of 2, a man who worked hard to give his kids the life he never had. Junior was the younger, energetic spark. Together, they were the security, the bar staff, and the heart of the pub. New Year's Eve 2008 into 2009 was supposed to be the victory lap for a successful year. The pub was decorated with streamers, the music was loud, it was a private party, mostly regulars and family friends. But in the world of UK crime, we know that all it takes is one ego to walk through the door to change the energy of a room. That ego belonged to 30-year-old Saturday Hassan. Hassan wasn't a regular, he was an outsider who had slipped into the party. He carried himself with a specific kind of arrogance, the kind that says, "I'm the biggest man in this room, and I'm looking for a reason to prove it." As the clock ticked toward midnight, the tension started to bubble. It started over something small, a girl. Hassan was making advances that weren't welcome. He was being aggressive, loud, and ruining the vibe. When a guest tried to intervene, Hassan didn't just argue, he grabbed a glass bottle, he smashed it. He held the jagged remains like a dagger. This is the moment where the Deslandis family's professionalism became their death warrant. Instead of calling the police and waiting, Wentworth, Darren and Junior did what landlords have done for centuries. They protected their patrons. They surrounded Hassan. They told him in no uncertain terms that his night was over. They escorted him to the door. There was a struggle, shoving, swearing, the usual pub door chaos. Hassan was fuming. His ego had been bruised in front of a crowded room. As the door slammed shut behind him, Hassan didn't walk away. He stood on the pavement screaming through the glass, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to bust your head." Inside, the music started back up. The family took a breath. They thought they'd done the hard part. They thought the threat was gone. They began to lock up, ushering the last few guests out. But Saturday, Hassan hadn't gone home to sleep it off. He had gone to his car, he had reached under the seat, and he was coming back. It's now roughly 1:30 AM. The adrenaline from the earlier scuffle has started to fade. Wentworth Deslandis is at the door, turning the key. He thinks the night is over. But then the glass vibrates. Saturday Hassan hasn't just returned, he's transformed. The man who was shouting and swearing minutes ago is now eerily focused. He's not empty-handed. In his grip is a semi-automatic handgun. The door is forced open. The family is standing in the foyer, a small, confined space that is about to become a killing zone. There is no room to run, no cover to dive behind. Hassan doesn't hesitate, he doesn't give a speech. He begins to fire. Darren, the eldest son, is the first in the line of fire. In a split second, the celebration of the new year is replaced by the deafening cracks of gunfire. The smell of cordite fills the air. Darren is hit. A bullet to the head. He collapses instantly. This wasn't a warning shot. This was professional grade coldness. As Darren lies on the floor, Hassan doesn't stop. He stands over him. Witnesses would later tell the court that it looked like a scene from a movie. Hassan continued to fire into the brothers' bodies as they lay on the ground. Wentworth described it as watching their bodies jump with the impact of the lead. Then Hassan turns the weapon on the younger brother, Junior. This is the part of the story that medical professionals still struggle to explain. Hassan is at point blank range. He isn't missing. He fires once, twice, 3 times into Junior's head. At that distance, with that calibre of weapon, the mortality rate is nearly 100%. But as the bullets strike, something incredible happens. Whether it was the angle of the entry or the sheer will to live, the bullets lodge in Junior's skull but fail to penetrate the brain's vital centres. Junior falls, blood pouring from his wounds, appearing to all the world as though he is dead, but there is one man left standing, Wentworth. The father, fueled by a mixture of shock and a sudden surge of strength, doesn't cower. He launches himself at Hassan. He's punching, grabbing, trying to wrestle the metal from the hands of the man who just destroyed his world. Hassan manages to shove the gun into Wentworth's mouth. This is the moment where the Newton Arms shooting moves from a tragedy to a miracle. Click, the first pull, the chamber is empty. Click, the second pull. Click, the third, the gun is dry. Saturday, Hassan realises he is now vulnerable and flees into the cold January night, leaving behind a family shattered and 2 brothers fighting for their lives. The manhunt for Saturday Hassan didn't take long. When he was finally brought to the Old Bailey, the defence tried a desperate tactic. Hassan claimed he didn't mean to kill anyone. He claimed the gun went off accidentally. But the forensics told a different story. You don't accidentally shoot 2 men multiple times in the head while they are lying on the floor. The judge saw through it. Hassan was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 37 years. He will be nearly 70 years old before he is even eligible to ask for parole. Today, the Newton Arms is gone, but in its place stands a housing development named Darren Deslandis House. A permanent reminder that while Saturday Hassan tried to end the family's legacy, the community of Thornton Heath chose to make it immortal. Most bank robbers have a simple plan: walk in, show a weapon, and hope the teller doesn't hit the silent alarm. But the crew we're talking about today, they didn't care about alarms. They didn't even care about the bank staff. They had a much bigger target in their sights: the impenetrable steel boxes of a G4S armoured van, while the rest of the underworld was trying to snatch bags from guards' hands. This gang was doing something never seen before in British criminal history. They weren't just hitting the guards. They were hijacking the entire logistics of the UK's cash and transit system. Equipped with high-performance VW Golf, R32s, forensic cleaning kits, and a custom-engineered military-grade battering ram, they became known to the North West Regional Crime Unit by a name that still carries weight in the Salford Underworld today, the Wham Ram Gang. And at the centre of it all, a man whose life reads like a high-stakes thriller, a man who killed a paratrooper, torched a police evidence yard and staged a daring prison van escape to the Costa Blanca. This is the story of Ricky Smith and the 7 months where he turned the streets of Greater Manchester into a personal ATM. To understand the Wham Ram robberies, you have to understand the man who allegedly pulled the strings. Richard Ricky Smith wasn't your average street level thug. By 2017, the police already considered him the consummate professional criminal. He was a man with a taste for the high life, champagne, 5-star weddings at the Lowry Hotel, and a £16,000 set of pearly white veneers. But every penny of that lifestyle was soaked in the proceeds of high-level crime. Smith's record was a roadmap of escalation. Back in 2001, he was jailed for the manslaughter of a former paratrooper, Ben Kamanalagi. Ben was a bouncer who had the nerve to kick Smith out of a Manchester nightclub. For that, he paid with his life. But Smith didn't slow down after his release. In 2010, he took it to the next level. In a move straight out of a Hollywood movie, he torched a vehicle recovery unit in Walkden used by the police. The goal? To incinerate every shred of forensic evidence linked to his crew. Just 24 hours after his arrest for that arson, Smith proved he was untouchable. Or so he thought. While being transported to court, his associates sprung him from a prison van in a clinical, violent ambush. Smith vanished. He fled to the sun-drenched coast of Spain, hiding out in the Costa Blanca until the Spanish police finally tracked him down. By the time he returned to the UK and served his time for that escape, most men would have kept their heads down. But for Ricky Smith, the game was just beginning. He had a new idea, a new tool, and a new crew. February 15th, 2017, School Road, Sale, 9:36 AM, a G4S van pulls up outside the Halifax Bank. This is usually the moment of maximum security. The guard is alert, the cameras are rolling. Suddenly, 3 men in balaclavas erupt from a stolen vehicle, but they don't just go for the guard. They grab him, use him as a human key, and force him to open the rear door of the van itself. Inside the back of a G4S van, there's a second layer of security, an internal steel door that separates the guard from the main cash hold. It's designed to be unhackable. There isn't enough room in the back of a van to swing a sledgehammer with enough force to break it. The gang knew this, so they brought their secret weapon, the Wham Ram. It was a specially designed, heavy-duty battering ram. 2 men would grip it, using the confined space of the van to drive the steel head repeatedly into the internal hatch. In minutes, they did the impossible. They breached the unbreachable door. That morning in Sale, they made off with £195,000 in cash. It was a jackpot, a proof of concept, and for Greater Manchester Police, it was the start of a nightmare. Because this crew wasn't just lucky, they were meticulous. Every getaway car was sprayed with bleach to kill DNA. Every second vehicle had the windows painted out black so the public couldn't see the balaclava-clad men sitting inside. They even carried bottles of petrol to torch their cars within seconds of switching. They were ghosts. And for the next 7 months, they were going to stay that way. After the Sale heist netted them nearly £200,000, the Wham Ram Gang felt invincible. They had found a flaw in the system, and they were going to exploit it until the well ran dry. But they weren't the only ones watching the CCTV footage. G4S, the security giants, realised they were facing a threat they hadn't prepared for. This wasn't a snatch and grab, it was a tactical breach. An arms race began on the streets of Greater Manchester. While the gang was scouting their next targets in Oldham and Stockport, G4S engineers were working overtime, reinforcing the internal doors of their entire fleet. They added steel plating, upgraded the locking mechanisms, and changed the protocols for how much cash was held in the vulnerable areas of the van. On April 26th, the gang struck again at the Barclays in Shaw. This time, they got £19,000. A month later, at the RBS in Rumilly, they took £35,000. The numbers were dropping. The Wham Ram was becoming less effective as the doors got stronger, but Ricky Smith was a consummate professional for a reason. He didn't quit, he adapted. If the battering ram wasn't enough, he'd bring something even heavier. By July, during a raid at the Barclays in Hyde, the gang pulled a move that left investigators stunned. They didn't just use a handheld ram. They brought a van with a massive steel girder protruding from the back. They reversed the van at high speed, using the weight of the vehicle to drive the girder through the G4S internal doors like a medieval siege engine. They were bold, they were desperate, and they were starting to leave a trail. The gang's confidence was their greatest asset, but it was about to become their undoing. On June 23rd, 2017, the crew targeted a G4S van outside the Tesco at Woodfields Retail Park in Barry. It was broad daylight. Dozens of shoppers were watching, but the gang didn't care. They were forensically aware. They wore balaclavas, high visibility vests to look like workers, and they moved with military precision. They battered the internal hatch, but the G4S upgrades worked. After all that effort, the Wham Ram only netted them a pathetic £690 and 4 bags of coins. Frustrated, they sped away in a stolen van, torched it, and switched to their second getaway car. They drove to a nearby alleyway to ditch the second vehicle and disappear into a third. This was the dead zone, the place where they always vanished. But as they ran down that alleyway, carrying their heavy tools and their Wham Ram, one member of the crew did the unthinkable. Maybe he was out of breath. Maybe he thought they were in the clear. But for just a few seconds, he pulled his balaclava up to get some air. He didn't see the private CCTV camera tucked under the eaves of a nearby building. The image wasn't high definition. It was grainy, shadowed, and distant. But when detectives from Operation Dominator, the specialist unit assigned to catch them, saw the footage, they knew exactly who they were looking at. The man in the alleyway was Patrick P.J. McDonough. McDonough was a seasoned criminal, a man who had previously been jailed for a bank robbery alongside the notorious Salford gangster Lee Tansey. For months, the police had been chasing ghosts. Now they had a face. And if they had McDonough, they knew it was only a matter of time before he led them straight to the architect, Ricky Smith. The police didn't move in immediately. They didn't want just one member. They wanted the whole Wham Ram firm. Undercover surveillance teams began tailing McDonough and Smith 24/7. They watched as the gang recruited 2 more members, John Groom and David Dargan, for what would be their final desperate score. August 29th, 2017, McCall's post office in Atherton. The gang pounced on a guard as he entered the store. They were armed with a crowbar and a sledgehammer. They were aggressive. They assaulted the manager. They were done with clean robberies. They wanted cash, and they wanted it now. But the Wham Ram luck had officially run out. They didn't get thousands. They didn't even get hundreds. The gang escaped with nothing but a load of postage stamps. As they piled into their 155 mph VW Golf R32, they thought they were making another clean getaway. They didn't realise that every motorway camera, every undercover car and every police helicopter in the county was locked onto their position. The Wham Ram Gang was driving straight into a steel trap on the M61, and this time there would be no Spanish sun to hide in. The Wham Ram Gang was used to being the hunters, but on August 29th, 2017, as they tore away from that Atherton post office with nothing but a bag of stamps, they were the ones being hunted. They were in their Silver Bullet, a high-spec VW Golf R32, a car capable of 155 mph. They thought they could outrun anything the Greater Manchester Police could throw at them. What they didn't know was that Operation Dominator had already flooded the area. Undercover units from the serious organised crime group had been tailing them for weeks. As the Golf screamed towards Junction 4 of the M61, the trap snapped shut. Police interceptors moved in, boxing the Golf into a pub car park near the motorway slip road. For Patrick P.J. McDonough, the game ended there. He was pinned and handcuffed before he could even reach for a door handle. But Ricky Smith, John Groom and David Dargan weren't ready to go back to a cell. They scrambled out of the car and sprinted toward the motorway. They weren't just running, they were looking for a fresh hostage vehicle. In a moment of pure desperation, the 3 masked men lunged at an elderly couple sitting in their car near the slip road. They punched the 64-year-old driver in the face, screaming at him to get out. It was a brutal, chaotic attempt at a carjacking. a far cry from the professional image Smith tried to project. But the police were faster. Before they could pull the couple from the car, a swarm of officers tackled Smith and his crew to the ground. The consummate professional was face down in the dirt, the balaclava finally off, and the Wham Ram era was officially over. Back at the station, Ricky Smith remained the perfect criminal. He was polite, he was calm, and he told the detectives absolutely nothing. But the police had more than enough. They had the DNA from the bleach-soaked cars, the grainy CCTV from the Barry alleyway, and the stamps from the final botched raid. During the interviews, the detectives couldn't help but notice Smith's gleaming white smile, those £16,000 veneers funded by the Halifax and Barclays heists. In a moment of dark humour, the officers joked that they'd be coming for his teeth next under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Smith might have kept his cool, but the numbers didn't lie. Over 7 months, the gang had netted £275,000. When the case reached Manchester Crown Court, the judge, recorder Barry Sale, wasn't interested in Smith's polite demeanour. He looked at a man who had already been jailed for manslaughter, arson, and a prison van escape. He saw a career criminal who viewed robbery as a chosen occupation. The defence tried to argue that the injuries to the guards were modest and that the gang was just trying to make a living. The judge wasn't buying it. He described the raids as ruthlessly efficient and professionally planned. Ricky Smith was handed 10 years and 11 months behind bars. Patrick P.J. McDonough received 10 years and 8 months. John Groom and David Dargan, the recruits for the final jobs, were given 6.5 years each. As they were led down to the cells, the Greater Manchester Underworld lost one of its most innovative crews. G4S spent millions reinforcing their vans, and the Wham Ram became a piece of criminal history, a unique, violent chapter in the long-running war between the police and the Salford firms. Ricky Smith's high life of champagne and five-star hotels was over. His new reality was a small cell, a long sentence, and the knowledge that, this time, there would be no prison van waiting to spring him. The Wham Ram Gang thought they were smarter than the system. They brought tools the police had never seen and methods that changed the way cash is moved across the UK. But in the end, it wasn't a high-tech sensor or a bulletproof door that caught them. It was a single balaclava lifted for just a few seconds in a quiet alleyway. Thanks for watching The Crime Reporter. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Manchester's gangland history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think a 10-year sentence is enough for a spree this organised? Or did Ricky Smith get off easy? Stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one. August 12th, 1966. 3 plainclothes detectives in a standard Triumph 2000 are patrolling the quiet streets of West London. It's a routine Friday afternoon. Near the walls of Wormwood Scrubs prison, they spot a battered blue van parked on Braybrook Street. It looks out of place. They pull over to ask a few simple questions. In less than 5 minutes, 3 officers would be down, 2 dead on the asphalt, 1 dying in the driver's seat. The man behind the trigger didn't panic. He didn't scramble. He used the cold, calculated precision of a professional soldier. His name was Harry Roberts. What followed was the most intensive manhunt in British history. A 96-day game of cat and mouse where a trained jungle warfare expert turned the English countryside into a combat zone. Today, we look at the life, the disappearance, and the final 2025 chapter of the man who became Britain's most notorious fugitive. This is the story of Harry Roberts.
I am in charge of the investigations into the murder of the 3 policemen at Shepherd's Bush. This is a photograph of Harry Roberts, who is wanted for questioning in connection with these murders. There are 3 features which may assist in more readily recognizing him. First, he has rather large bulging or protruding eyes. Second, the prominent heavy arched eyebrows. And third, the heavy or thick lids beneath the eyes. But I would emphasize that no member of the public takes any risks whatsoever.
To understand how Roberts evaded the combined forces of the Metropolitan Police and the home counties for 3 months, you have to look at his past. Before he was a household name for all the wrong reasons, he was a soldier. Roberts served with the Central Africa Command and later in the Malayan Emergency. In the dense jungles of Malaya, Roberts learned contact drills. He learned how to disappear into the brush, how to live off the land, and how to stay calm when the bullets started flying. But when he returned to civilian life, those skills didn't stay on the battlefield. They were brought into the London underworld. By 1966, Roberts was a career criminal. On that fateful August day, he wasn't just sitting in a van, he was prepared for a major armed robbery. He had a Luger pistol, he had a plan, and he had a hair-trigger temper that would change the face of British policing forever. Detective Sergeant Christopher Head, Detective Constable David Wimwell, and PC Geoffrey Fox were unarmed. In 1966, that was the standard. When they approached the van, Roberts knew that if they searched the vehicle, he was going back to prison for a very long time. He didn't hesitate. He shot David Wimwell at point-blank range while the officer was looking at the van's logbook. He then chased Sergeant Head down the street and shot him dead. His accomplice, John Duddy, panicked and shot PC Fox through the window of the police car. It wasn't a getaway, it was a slaughter. The killers vanished into the London fog. The public was outraged. This wasn't just another gangland hit, this was a direct attack on the state. The death penalty had only recently been abolished in the UK, and suddenly the nation was screaming for the noose to be brought back for one man, Harry Roberts.
Bring back the Annie!
The Police Federation has suggested that capital punishment should be reintroduced for murder of policemen. Is there any question of your reconsidering the Home Office position on this?
Well, I can well understand the reaction and feelings of policemen at the present time, but it would be quite wrong for me to take a major policy decision in the shadow of one event, however horrible that may be.
Your mother speaking to you, I ask you from the bottom of my heart to come into the open and give yourself up. If you make an appointment with me, I will come with you. The whole thing is killing me, and I'm sure I'm advising you correct.
While his accomplices were quickly rounded up, Roberts was a different breed of criminal. He knew the police would check the pubs and the safe houses, so he went where they couldn't follow. He went to ground in Epping Forest. This is where Roberts' military training became his greatest weapon. He didn't just hide, he survived. He built spider holes, underground pits lined with plastic and camouflaged with leaves. He stole clothes from backyard washing lines and poached food from local farms. He was a ghost. He later admitted that he watched the police search parties from the shadows, sometimes only a few yards away, while they remained completely oblivious to his position. For 96 days, the newspapers were filled with his face. He became a folk devil. People were locking their doors across the country. He eventually moved from Epping to a barn in Thorley, Hertfordshire. He was living like a phantom, using every survival trick he had learned in the Malayan jungle to stay one step ahead of a massive nationwide dragnet. Roberts was finally caught in November 1966, found hiding under layers of hay in a barn.
Found a tent which had been dug in by about 18 inches, found a shooter in there, found clothing which we described, so obviously they knew it was Roberts. He wasn't there, so they surrounded, then they brought in other, obviously, help, or surrounded a large area and searched all the outbuildings and that. In a barn stacked with bales of hay, he'd got behind and hidden up, was Roberts with another shooter wound. Gave no trouble, gave himself up.
At that trial, which began on the 6th of December, Roberts pleaded guilty to the murders of 2 of the policemen. Whitney and Duddy pleaded not guilty. But all 3 were quickly convicted of what Mr. Justice Glyn Jones called the most heinous crime committed in this country for more than a generation. The murderers of Sergeant Christopher Head and Constables David Wimwell and Geoffrey Fox received 30-year sentences.
He gave him life with a 30-year minimum, the longest sentence of its kind at the time. But the British government was in no hurry to ever let him walk free. He became a symbol of the ultimate crime, Every time his parole came up, the Police Federation and the families of the fallen officers fought to keep him behind bars. He eventually served 48 years. When he was finally released in 2014 at the age of 78, it sparked a firestorm of debate. Had he paid his debt? Or should life have meant life for someone who executed officers of the law? He spent his final years living quietly in Peterborough, a relic of a more violent era. In December 2025, the story finally reached its conclusion. At 89 years old, Harry Roberts died in a hospital bed. Not the ending many felt he deserved.
I've seen murder, I've seen bodies at murders, and seen all sorts of things, post-mortems, but you don't see 3 policemen laying dead only, and never for the rest of the service either. It was the most outstanding, I think, callous, horrendous murders we've had.
In 1966, he leaves behind a legacy of trauma and a case that forever changed how the British police handle armed criminals. But what do you think? Was 48 years enough? Or was the judge right all those years ago when he said life should mean exactly what it says? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm the Crime Reporter, and I'll see you in the next one. January 23rd, 2012, 9 AM. The air is biting cold in Stafford. A GEO Amy prison van, reinforced with steel and plexiglass, cruises down a nondescript road. Inside, John Anslow is being moved to the Crown Court. To the 2 guards in the front, it's just another Monday. To the man in the back, it's the go signal for a multi-million-pound operation. Suddenly, a silver Volkswagen Scirocco screams across the lane, swerving with precision to block the van's path. This wasn't a random accident, it was a tactical kill zone set up. 3 men leap out. They aren't street thugs, they are a professional extraction team. Balaclavas on, sledgehammers out. The sound of the first sledgehammer hitting the reinforced glass is like a gunshot. Then comes the real thing. One man levels a sawn-off shotgun inches from the driver's face. The message is silent but clear: open the door or die. In less than 60 seconds, the glass is showered across the asphalt. Anslow is yanked from the wreckage. No words are exchanged. He's thrown into the Scirocco. The tyres scream, and John Skits Anslow becomes the first Category A prisoner to escape high security custody in the UK in 17 years. How does a man command that kind of loyalty? To understand the escape, you have to understand the shadow Anslow cast over the Black Country. He didn't start as a fugitive, he started as a community figure in Tipton. By his early 30s, Anslow had moved beyond local dealing. He was a CEO of the Underworld, managing a complex logistics network, moving Class A drugs across the West Midlands. He lived a life: high-end cars, designer clothes, and a reputation for being untouchable. In the pubs of Tipton, people knew his name, but no one talked to the old Bill. But in 2010, the businessman persona cracked. A professional hitman named David Harrison, who happened to be Anslow's uncle, walked into the home of Richard Deacon and shot him in his bed. It was cold, calculated, and professional. When West Midlands Police began Operation _Lincoln, the digital breadcrumbs led straight to Anslow. They alleged he was the puppet master. Facing a life sentence for murder, Anslow realised the only way to win was to leave the board entirely. While the UK launched one of the biggest manhunts in modern history, putting a £10,000 bounty on his head, Anslow was already gone. He hadn't just switched cars, he'd switched continents. He surfaced in northern Cyprus, a territory that, at the time, represented a legal black hole for British police. Because the UK doesn't officially recognise the government of Northern Cyprus, there was no formal extradition treaty. For 439 days, Anslow lived like a king in the sun. He frequented luxury villas in Kyrenia, dining at high-end seaside restaurants, convinced that the British law ended at the Mediterranean shore. But he underestimated the back door of international law. In March 2013, local police arrested him for simple immigration offences. Instead of a long extradition battle, they simply put him on a plane to Heathrow. When he landed, the handcuffs were waiting. The King of Tipton was back in a cage. In 2014, Anslow stood trial for the murder of Richard Deacon. He played a high-stakes game of truth or dare with the jury. He stood in the dock and admitted to being one of the biggest drug dealers in the region. He admitted to the escape, but he looked the jury in the eye and said, "I am a dealer, not a killer." He claimed the dozens of phone calls to the hitman were about drug shipments, not a murder contract. It worked. The jury found him not guilty of murder. However, his honesty about the drugs and the escape backfired. He was slapped with a combined 22-year sentence. He was sent to HMP Belmarsh, then to HMP Wakefield, known as the Monster Mansion. It was here the legends grew. His father, John Anslow Sr., claimed his son was housed next to the Lee Rigby killers. He claimed John did one of them in the exercise yard to stop their constant shouting. While the Ministry of Justice remains tight-lipped, in the prison world, Anslow's stock skyrocketed. He was the man who wouldn't break. Even in the most secure unit in the country, Anslow found a way to bridge the gap between his cell and the outside world. In 2020, the system was rocked by the Millie Kirk scandal. Kirk was a 26-year-old prison officer who fell under Anslow's influence. Using an illegal burner phone, the two exchanged over 1,000 text messages in just 6 months. The content ranged from the personal to the logistical. It proved that even behind 40-foot walls, Anslow was a manipulator of the highest order. Kirk was jailed, and Anslow's release date drifted further and further into the future. By now, he was serving nearly 30 years. Took another turn. David Harrison, the man already serving life for the 2010 hit on Richard Deacon, has been hauled back before the courts. At 76 years old, Harrison, currently housed at the high-security HMP Franklin, has been charged with a murder that dates back to March 2008. The victim was Haroon Khan, a 39-year-old taxi driver and father of 4, who was gunned down outside his home in Tipton. For 18 years, the case remained one of the region's most haunting whodunits. But the charges didn't stop there. Harrison is also accused of a 2007 shooting in Dudley that left a man with life-changing injuries. A preliminary trial date has been set for November 16th, 2026. This latest revelation suggests that Harrison wasn't just a hitman for hire in 2010, he may have been a one-man crime wave operating in the shadows of the West Midlands for decades, between the Sun and Belmarsh, country's darkest corridors. The Anslow name has become synonymous with a cycle of violence that the Black Country cannot seem to shake. Is this the end of the dynasty, or just another chapter in a story written in blood? You've been watching The Crime Reporter. If you want to see more deep dives into the forensics of major UK cases, hit subscribe and let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Dealing with a horrific murder here, I need the public's help to help me identify who the victim is.
The village of Cottard in Hertfordshire is the kind of place where nothing ever happens. It's quiet, it's rural, it's safe. But on a cold March afternoon in 2009, a passerby spotted a package left in a ditch. It was wrapped tightly in blue plastic. When the police arrived and peeled back those layers, they didn't find fly-tipped rubbish. They found a human leg, severed at the thigh with terrifying surgical precision. No torso, no head, no identity. 1 week later, 25 miles away, a left forearm was found by a dog walker in Wheat Hampstead. 2 days after that, a head was discovered in a farmer's field 100 miles north in Leicestershire. To the horror of the responding officers, the eyes, the tongue, the nose and the ears had been surgically removed. The press called it a macabre puzzle. The police feared they were hunting a skilled surgeon. But the truth was far more sinister. They weren't looking for a doctor, they were looking for a man who had spent years as a dissector for one of London's most feared crime families.
Removed. There are no eyes, there is no nose, there is no mouth, there is no tongue, there are no ears. It is an anatomical dissection, a fresh anatomical dissection.
The story of the Jigsaw killer. By early April 2009, the UK was gripped by fear. Human remains were appearing across the country like a trail of breadcrumbs. A torso here, a limb there. Detective Superintendent Michael Hanlon led the investigation, but his team was baffled. The cuts on the limbs weren't jagged or frantic. A senior forensic expert from Edinburgh later remarked that if his students had performed dissections this cleanly, he would have given them a merit. But who was the victim? Without a face or fingerprints, the Jigsaw man remained a ghost. Police eventually turned to facial reconstruction, releasing a digital image of what the victim might have looked like. It worked. A man came forward saying his brother, 49-year-old Geoffrey Howe, hadn't been seen for weeks. Geoffrey was a jovial, well-liked kitchen salesman from Southgate, North London. He was a man with a big heart, perhaps too big. Geoffrey lived alone, but he had recently taken in 2 lodgers to help them out. His friend and former colleague, 38-year-old Stephen Marshall, and Marshall's 21-year-old girlfriend, Sarah Bush. When police arrived at Geoffrey's flat, Marshall and Bush were still there. They calmly told the police Geoffrey had simply packed his bags and left after a row, but the house told a different story. The flat was strangely empty. Geoffrey's bed was gone, replaced by a cheap blow-up mattress. Under the floorboards and deep in the carpet fibres, forensics found the one thing Marshall couldn't scrub away: Geoffrey's blood. Investigators began digging into Stephen Marshall's past, and what they found sent shivers down their spines. Marshall wasn't just a personal trainer. In the 1990s, he had worked as a doorman for the Addams family, also known as the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate. This wasn't just a gang, they were an organised crime empire worth £200 million. Marshall's side job for them, disposing of bodies. He wasn't just a killer, he was a specialist. The trial began in January 2010. At first, Marshall tried to pin everything on his girlfriend, Sarah Bush. He sat in the dock, bulky and arrogant, showing no remorse. But the evidence was overwhelming. CCTV showed him disposing of the blood-stained mattress. Automatic number plate recognition cameras tracked his car to every single location where a body part was found. Then, mid-trial, a shock. Marshall suddenly changed his plea to guilty. But he didn't stop there. He admitted to his legal team that Geoffrey Howe wasn't his first puzzle. Marshall claimed that while working for the Addams family, he had dismembered at least 4 other men between 1995 and 1998. He described it as a job. He would take the bodies, dissect them so they wouldn't damage the bones, making them easier to pack, and dump them in Epping Forest. He was a human butcher, perfected by years of service to the underworld. Geoffrey Howe had been killed because he finally stood up to Marshall for not paying rent. Marshall didn't see a friend. He saw an inconvenience that needed to be processed. In February 2010, Stephen Marshall was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years. He will be in his 70s before he's even eligible for parole. Sarah Bush was sentenced to nearly 4 years for her role in helping cover up the crime. The case changed the way the UK looks at missing person reports and forensic joint mapping. It remains one of the most chilling examples of how organised crime's dark skills can spill over into civilian life. Geoffrey Howe was a man who tried to help a friend. In return, he became the victim of a man who had lost all sense of humanity. Stephen Marshall remains behind bars today. The Jigsaw murder serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes the monsters we hear about in the underworld are closer than we think. Sometimes they're even living in the spa room. I am the crime reporter to Next Time Stay Safe. They called him the babyface killer. To the world, Jamie Bain looked like a boy who hadn't yet grown into his own features. but in the dark underbelly of Edinburgh's south side, he was a name spoken with genuine fear. On April 22nd, 2006, that fear would turn into a nightmare that changed the city forever. It was a typical Saturday night at the Marmion Bar in the Gracemount area of Edinburgh. The last orders bell was about to ring, marking the end of another weekend shift. But for those inside, it would be the last moment of peace they would ever know. This story is defined by a single image that shocked Scotland. It wasn't the face of a cold, calculating assassin. It was the face of Jamie Bain in court, unrecognisable, purple with bruises and swollen shut. He hadn't been beaten by the police. He had been beaten by the very people he tried to terrorise. This is the story of a silly row between a boyfriend and girlfriend that escalated into a gangland execution. It's a story of a woman who chose a lover over her own, murdered flesh and blood. And it is the story of a bloody street war that left the streets of Edinburgh stained for a generation. To understand the Marmion Massacre, you have to understand the geography. Gracemount and Gilmerton aren't the Edinburgh you see on tourist postcards. There are no castle views here. In the mid-2000s, these housing estates were the front lines of a territorial drug war. Jamie Bain, just 22 years old, was a man with a hair-trigger temper and a reputation for extreme violence. Despite his youth, he was already a father of two and a veteran of the criminal justice system with 15 previous convictions. On the other side of this looming conflict was the Hendry and McKinnon clan. Alex McKinnon was a local legend. He was a 32-year-old former Scottish bantamweight boxing champion, a man who knew how to fight, but was deeply respected as a family man. He was a father of two, a man who worked hard and enjoyed his weekends at his local pub. But the bridge between these two worlds, the world of the boxer and the world of the killer, was a woman named Dion Hendry. Dion was Jamie Bain's on-off girlfriend, but more importantly, she was the cousin of Alex McKinnon and the niece of James Hendry. The spark that lit the fuse wasn't a high-stakes drug deal or a stolen territory. According to court records, it was a silly row between Bain and Dion earlier that day. Bain had allegedly assaulted her, and when her family stepped in to protect her, he felt insulted. In the twisted logic of the gangland code, an insult to your pride is a death sentence for the one who insulted you. To Jamie Bain, her family were no longer relatives, they were targets. As the clock ticked toward 11 o'clock that Saturday night, the atmosphere inside the Marmion Bar was relaxed. Locals were finishing their pints, chatting about the football, scores and making plans for Sunday. Suddenly the front door burst open. Two figures in identical black hooded tops and silver masks stepped into the light. One of them was Jamie Bain, and he was carrying a double-barrelled sawn-off shotgun he had hidden down his trouser leg earlier that night. Bain didn't hesitate. He didn't issue a warning or a demand. He aimed at James Hendry and fired. The force of the blast hit Hendry in the chest, throwing him back against the furniture. As the room erupted into screams and chaos, Alex McKinnon turned to run, trying to find cover. Bain, showing a chilling level of composure, reloaded the weapon. He levelled the barrels at McKinnon's back and pulled the trigger again. The former boxing champ collapsed near the bar, killed instantly in front of dozens of witnesses. Bain and his accomplice, Richard Cosgrove, turned to make their getaway. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. The people of Gracemount weren't just witnesses. They were friends and family of the men on the floor. Fueled by a mix of pure adrenaline and grief, the pub patrons charged. They didn't care about the gun. They tackled Bain, dragging him to the ground before he could reach the exit. The baby-faced assassin was subjected to a brutal, sustained beating with his own shotgun. By the time the police arrived, Bain was a mass of broken bones. He would later claim in court that the beating gave him brain damage, a convenient excuse to say he had no memory of the murders. The trial that followed in 2007 was a media circus and one of the most expensive in Scottish history. 3 men stood in the dock: Jamie Bain, the gunman; Richard Cosgrove, the accomplice who claimed he was forced to participate; and Bernard Ben Young, the man who supplied the gun and acted as the mastermind behind the hit. The jury didn't buy the excuses. They returned a unanimous guilty verdict. Bain was sentenced to life with a minimum of 22 years. Cosgrove got 20 years and Young was handed 19. But the most bizarre chapter of this story was yet to come. In 2014, while Bain was serving his sentence at Glenoshiel Prison, a wedding took place. Dionne Hendry, the woman whose own cousin had been murdered and whose uncle had been shot by Bain, stood by his side and married him. The wedding caused a massive public outcry and reignited the feud between the families. Within months of the ceremony, the street war returned. A makeshift bomb was left at Dionne's door and her car was riddled with gunfire in a series of retaliatory attacks. The aftermath of that night has been long and bitter. James Hendry, the man who miraculously survived Bain's shotgun blast, would eventually find himself in prison for a separate one-punch killing before passing away in 2019. Jamie Bain himself has remained a target behind bars. In 2019 he was ambushed by 4 inmates in Shotts Prison. They beat him and allegedly stole a £20,000 Rolex watch he had been wearing, a symbol of the gangland wealth he still tried to project from a cell. The Marmion Bar has long since closed its doors, but for the people of South Edinburgh, the memories are still vivid. Alex McKinnon's widow once stated that capital punishment should be brought back for the likes of them. For the families involved, the sentence didn't end in 2007. They are still living with the consequences of a silly row that ended in a massacre. Jamie Bain may have had the face of a baby, but he left behind the legacy of a monster. I'm the Crime Reporter, and thank you for watching.